The mind's potential lies beyond the realm of thought.
All right, so we're live, and we're live, right? So take it away, man.
So we just got done recording the first episode about 20 minutes ago before we realized, unfortunately, we made a small error and we weren't able to capture all of our recordings. So here we are, starting fresh. And
By all of the recording, everything that I said was not. I wasn't recorded, so basically, it was a recording of him, of you talking, and a bunch of empty space. So, yeah.
Here we are. We're gonna start fresh.
Take two.
Yeah, take two. Here we go. All right. So we're going to start by giving a little bit of background on who me and Sean are and why we decided to do this podcast. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and dive into the topic for today, which is going to be reoccurring thoughts and how to overcome them. So, Sean, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
I guess it only fits because we just did it, and when we did it before, I asked you that question. So let's go.
Yeah.
So I'm Sean. Grew up in a small town in Frankfort, Kansas. I'm 32 years old. And, you know, things that kind of identify my personality. I like a lot of heavy music, but I also like a lot of the other side of that. So, like, I've been listening to a lot of, like, synthwave pop stuff. And I'm really deep into movies. I like a good story on a screen. There's a strong association I make with that. But that's kind of the things that kind of identify me as a person. So let's take it to you, Chris. Who are you?
Well, my name is Chris. I'm 23 years old, and I have a beautiful daughter who's going to be 1 here next month. And that's pretty much where all of my time has been, of course. Some of, I guess, what makes me a person, things that I like and hobbies. I like to go to the gym. I love to read books. So I read a ton of horror novels and personal development books. I like to listen to a lot of heavy music, but I have appreciation for all, although I don't really get jiggy with country. But I can get down with some. You know.
I'm from Kansas, dude.
Yeah.
There's a certain part of me that's got a twang to it, and
Yeah.
I love some country, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess I've been on the spiritual journey now here for a few years, but the dedication I amped it up a bit this year. So we're kind of, I guess we can jump into why we're doing this podcast now. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you know, I look at my life up to this point, and I kind of try to think what are the ways I could be better. And I think that just the way kind of it goes is you start looking towards things like spirituality, and you start looking for answers from that point of view. And I started doing that for myself, and you know, I found some things that really kind of seemed to help with that. And then, you know, I met Chris, and it just kind of, everything kind of started to take form, and I started to realize that spirituality to me is how I live my life, and it's and it's the, the basis from which I move forward in that regard. And so that's kind of where I'm at as far as, what it is to me, and how I'm trying to make that a stronger part of my life. So
Yeah.
how is it for you?
So yeah, like going on this spiritual journey, you hear so many different things from so many different people,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to navigate through this and you're looking for advice, you're looking for teachers,
It's
and
confusing.
oh, it most definitely is, especially when you start diving into all the multiple religions, and it just gets confusing and gets jumbled up, and it's hard to make your way through this path, right? But since we've been talking a lot this past week, and we've been sharing a lot of our philosophies and pretty much everything that we've learned, I feel I'm a lot less confused now, and definitely by us talking about this project and really kind of making it happen as far as this podcast goes, I feel it's given me such a better foundation to go from, for us to now dive deeper into our spirituality and make this more present in our lives and allow us to apply it more. And that's what this
So
podcast is for me.
exactly. Yeah, that's where I was going to go with that. So, it's for me, this podcast is just that. It's a representation of, you know, living my life week to week, which is what this show is going to be. It's gonna be a week to week kind of get together where we talk about the past week, and kind of just put things in the perspective of, how are things this week compared to the past as a whole, right? And how can you use that to form a like an ever growing place of perspective from which you will operate moving forward. And so I think it's really important, like on a fundamental level, that we kind of keep the essence of this like rooted in that. And so, we had this kind of vision that started to like take form when we were talking about doing this thing, and we kind of took that and made it a format. And maybe you can talk about that.
Kind of how we like came to the idea of how we're gonna do this.
Right.
Yeah, so it actually, I've been wanting to do like a podcast of some sort, but I didn't really know what I would do it about or why I would even do it. So I never really entertained the idea further than that. But once I started diving into my spirituality, and then I posted in that subreddit seeing if anyone would like to possibly co-host something like this with me. And that's where you and me started just chatting, just getting to know each other a lot better, right? And
Yeah.
we realized like how in tune we are with each other, and how we can bring our frequency and vibe at a higher level together, and how we can start to apply these things to our lives and then put it out there for people to listen and hopefully gain some valuable insight and knowledge from, and maybe it can help them navigate through their path as well.
And, that was really helpful, because just right off the bat, it was, there was absolutely no preconceived notion of this is how I think he's going to feel, so I'm going to say it this way. And there's no, like there was just honesty from me to you and from you to me. And what it boiled down to is we found some extremely strong common ground in that. And we used that as a way to this thing isn't something I did, and it's not something he did. We did this together, and I think that's going to be represented in how this show comes out. And I want to take a moment to reflect on something, and it's the fact that we're doing this first episode again, because I've had an amazing week ever since we started talking, because it just is. And I tend to do something, and it's I tend to find things and identify with it. And I don't know how this was even possible, but we have a topic that we picked for this introductory episode, and maybe you can start off by saying what that topic is, and then we can come back to this.
Yeah, so it's overcoming reoccurring thoughts. That was the topic that we kind of set on, because that was something I find myself struggling with every day. And I've been on the spiritual journey for a long time now. Well, I wouldn't say a long time, but I feel like I've a few years, and to still have this as a struggle. And I know a lot of people struggle with this as well. I feel like it would be a very good introduction topic for us to dive into.
And just so you guys understand the kind of relationship we have back and forth, every time he says that, I like to remind him, it's not a couple years, dude. It's your whole life, right?
Yeah.
Like it's everything. It just is. And so with that in mind, we wanted to pick a topic that was a good starting point for this whole thing moving forward, representative of everything as a whole. And the reason that overcoming reoccurring thoughts is just that is it's such a common thing that happens, and it causes so much confusion because you think so many different things about, I can just try harder. I can just look at it this way. I can just do this, and I can just do that. And you try to find one single solution, and that's just not what happens. And, I think that the best way to sum this up is we had this amazing week, and we put all of ourselves into how we were going to do this podcast. And we did it in a way where it's just going to be a conversation. So I'm going to start just talking to you now, Chris.
Yeah.
It's just that, man. We put everything into this, and I had such a strong emphasis on making this thing something that was authentic. And
Yeah, you did.
the very moment that we realized that my voice wasn't recorded in the first take of this, it hurt, but
Yeah, it definitely did.
it didn't hurt that bad.
No.
I thought that I was going to sit down and dwell on this, and I thought I was going to go back to everything I've done in the past, which is, I was still going to try to move forward, but it was, I don't know how this is possible, dude, but I just have this incredible insight to myself now to see this and know that had we not gotten back on and started this episode again and waited until tomorrow like we said we were going to do, it would have been doomed from the start. And the way I know that is we got up after we decided we were going to do this tomorrow, and I got another glass of water, and I sat down and just put a song on, and I was just going to sit back and relax. And this is what the song said. It said, "I just want to have a heart worth breaking. That's all I really want to say." Those are the literal lyrics. And to sit there and hear that, I was just like, my God. Like,
Yeah.
the next words are, "I'm sorry, my hands are shaking. I don't normally feel this way, but my whole life is just the chances I'm not taking." Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So what I thought was going to be something that made this next take disingenuous and not authentic and real, it's not that.
Yeah, I agree. When I went and sat down, initially I felt a little frustrated and irritated because I really was excited to have this done tonight, right? And I sat down and I realized especially leading up to it this past week after talking with you, I wasn't that upset about it anymore. It just kind of, that feeling just kind of came, and I let it be for a minute, and then it went. And a lot of that, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that maybe a week ago, because my spirituality hasn't been so present in my life as it is now. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into our topic, and that is overcoming reoccurring thoughts. So with that, what are some of the reoccurring thoughts you find yourself having, and how do you overcome them?
Well, let's see. Reoccurring thoughts. I guess it's we have to start by going past that, and for me, and looking at the thoughts themselves, and why, because the thoughts themselves are not an individual thing for me. It's like a predisposition I have to act a certain way that has been like reinforced by the way I've acted based upon those thoughts. And it's like fitting things into a category where I have like an automated response to it, and being able to go past the thought or the emotion that is attached to it, and seeing that is like the first time I was, like able to do that was this week, and maybe in an ultimate sense was just a few minutes ago before we started again. Because the whole point of this getting rid of reoccurring thoughts is even important, is because when you're thinking like that, you're not doing. And so the reason that's important is not because there's a good or bad response involved. It's because if you're not doing, you're not experiencing, and the experience is life. And so on some kind of fundamental sense, you're not present in the moment, and your awareness is just not at a level that allows you to see everything for what it is. And it goes back to that like predispositioned response. And that's kind of like how I would start to describe that for me. How would you take that?
So for me, like a lot of times when I have these reoccurring thoughts, right, I see them, they're stemming from desires that I have that go unfulfilled. And when these desires go unfulfilled, I'll either have the reoccurring thoughts where I'm like trying to fulfill them externally. And that's what keeps these thoughts reoccurring, because externally, nothing's ever going to fulfill your desires long term. You might find something short term, but then again, you'll find yourself in this cycle and this loop of having these reoccurring thoughts. And I found myself struggling with that a lot. So one thing that I really had to do was find a sense of fulfillment within myself, so that way I'm not having these strong desires that keep going unfulfilled, because that's the catalyst for my reoccurring thoughts. And then, like you said as well, like when we have these reoccurring thoughts, it's taking away what's most important, and that's the experience that we're in at the moment. And we can't fully take that moment in while we're thinking. We can't be fully aware of what's happening around us while we're constantly stuck in our thoughts.
And to kind of, expand on that, there's been nothing but positive reflections on the moments we've had this week. And
right.
We didn't get into it like this, and I'm so glad we're doing this again, because I see something now that I didn't see before. And I made the point that even though I was reaching out to you and we were having these good reflections on the moments that I had been experiencing.
Yeah, positive reflections.
I still didn't see it the right way. And it's the notion that I had at first was that even though we were doing that, we were still being taken out of the moment. And that's not what it was. It was predicated in gratitude. And that's still an active experience, right?
Right.
Like it may be knowing that you're having this wave of emotion that's coming over you, but what you're doing is experiencing gratitude and reaching out to somebody who understands that. And that's a continuation of the entire thing. And so for me to think that that was somehow fundamentally not what you would, you know, do you kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so just for context, we were talking about, regardless if it's a good or bad sort of feeling we're having towards something, like a good or bad thought, it's still taking us out of the present moment. So like, for example, today, what I was thinking about was this podcast a lot, right? What direction it would go, the future it would have for us, and all the positive feelings that have been coming up with this project. But by having all of these reoccurring thoughts, regardless if they're positive or negative, it was still taking me out of the present moment. And how this reflects onto what you were saying is you gave me a phone call after your interview today. And
Which for context, yes, I had a job interview, and there were so many things about it that were just absolutely phenomenal. It's the best interview I've ever had in my life, and we can get into that, but go ahead. Or
Yeah,
maybe I should just do it now.
yeah, you can go ahead and do it now because it'll finish tying it in.
Okay, so I had an interview today, and the way it happened was just the way it happened. I showed up a little bit early, and the doors were locked, and it's for Evergy. So in Kansas, you have this big electric company that does all of these different things. Like they run Jeffrey Energy Center, they run a nuclear power plant. Like there's just so many things that once they kind of merged with a couple of different companies, they became like this big entity. And I showed up there for that interview, and their doors are, I think it's because of COVID, they just haven't kind of reopened that whole front entrance thing yet. So the security guard had to come let me in. And that's kind of the basis of what this whole thing was about. And it's that I have this predisposition to fit people into categories of the role that they're in and not treat them as the person, but treat them as the role. And so typically in the past, and you know, it starts to sound like it's got malice behind it, and that's, or maybe like a negative connotation, but the actual happening of it wasn't a bad thing. It was me reflecting on myself and seeing that I wasn't engaging whoever the person was as the person. I was engaging them as the role. And so typically, like the security guard, once he let me in, it would be, you know, I'd be a little chatty or whatever, but it was just like not like me to him. It was like me to somebody that was in a role. And so when we talked about it, it came out, and it was this thing about, because you said the word desire, and what we found was that what it really was that I didn't have that connection with him, and because of the way that I put him into that role. And since I viewed him as an entire person, I was able to have an actual connection, even if he didn't see it that way. And it's because that's the way I felt, and that's the place from which I led the discussion we had. And so maybe you can go ahead and expand on it now.
Yeah, so to bring it back, what we were talking about is we were reflecting on that earlier, and he was telling me about the tendencies and how we can. So I'm trying to figure out the right way to word this. Yeah, shit, I don't know.
Well,
No.
it was it was a little bit more than that too, because it was that, you know, what we reflected on afterwards, because I you know, I had the experience, but then I also made a phone call to Chris, and that's when we started reflecting on the whole experience. And the whole thing was rooted in, I was present and I was there, and it was like we tied it into the yin and the yang.
Hold on. I'm having like a hard time with this recording.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right.
So what would you like to do?
Yeah. I definitely think we should probably break off of it for the night and come back to it tomorrow. And I feel like it almost might be better to have a whole new topic to dive into.
Okay.
I think
yeah.
I think that would be best. I see that we're still we're reflecting a lot on the last episode, and
right.
it's jumbling me up a little bit. And
yeah, me too.
I'm trying to remember how our conversation went so I can bring it
right.
back. And
right.
I feel like it's not being really authentic.
So hold on.
Yeah.
We still want to do this tonight. So you want to we can stop now and then start again and do the whole thing over with a new topic. Do you want to do that now or tomorrow?
Yeah, we can do that now.
Okay. So what should the topic be? I'm going to go ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll wait to stop, but
yeah.
Actually, we don't even have to stop.
Because we can edit it out.
Right. So, what should the topic be?
We can go with, let's see. We could almost kind of tie it into something really similar, like overcoming negative thoughts.
Okay.
Because it's still, I want to have that really that big topic that everyone can relate to for the first episode, and I feel like that's a good one too.
Okay.
Overcoming negative thoughts, and then how we can do that. I definitely think we can. I think it would be nice if we did mention that this is a second recording, but I don't think
we shouldn't refer back to the first.
Yeah, we shouldn't refer back to the first, and I feel like we shouldn't keep referring to it
right.
as much. We could acknowledge it, but I definitely think acknowledge it and kind of leave it at that.
Okay.
So we don't feel like we're forcing anything, and everything can feel natural.
Right.
And overcoming negative thoughts is still another one I really struggle with, so I think we can hit it home with this.
Okay. So let me pull up the window again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are at 28 minutes and 21 seconds. I'm going to make a note of that. So we'll start at 29 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
This is it, man.
Yeah, here we go. So we can go ahead and we'll start by introducing ourselves, and from there we can go ahead and discuss why we're starting this podcast and what kind of inspired us, and then we'll jump into today's topic, which is going to be overcoming negative thoughts.
All right, well, I don't know which one of us is going to start. maybe that was the start, but here we go. So this is Being Now, the podcast Being Now. I'm Sean, and this is Chris, and let's just start. So who are you?
Well, my name's Chris. I am 23 years old. I have a beautiful daughter who's going to be 1 here next month. And I guess to kind of give a summary of things that I like to do, or this character I've kind of developed over the years. I like to listen to heavy metal music. I like to read books, go to the gym. And I've recently really been diving into my spirituality, and it's been very present for me this past year, although it's been seeds I've been nourishing over the past few years. This past year, like I said, it's been really developing, so that's a big reason why I'm so excited to do this podcast.
Absolutely. So my name is Sean. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in a small town in Kansas. I live in Topeka now, and I also like metal music. I like synth pop music as well, and I really like movies. And I like what I like dramas, I think, and there's a lot of movies that aren't dramas that I see as drama. So I'm just a big movie buff. So that's kind of my thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess we should just start by saying why we wanted to even do the podcast in the first place, right?
Yeah. So the reason why we're deciding to do this podcast is because throughout our journey, we've been, at least I could say for myself, really confused on what kind of direction to go in, especially when you're first getting into it and you hear all these different philosophies. You're taking all this advice and guidance from tons of other people, spiritual teachers, a lot of online stuff that we read, and it just gets all jumbled up, right? And so the reason why me and Sean have decided to start this podcast is to help strengthen our spiritual muscle, to help us bring spirituality into our lives more presently, so that way we can really dive deep into it and align ourselves with a better future, I guess I could say, and one that we can start expanding and growing. Hopefully we can put this out there and anyone listening can gain some valuable insight or knowledge, and hopefully it'll help them along their path as well.
And one of the things we decided to do was make it like every episode is an extension of the first. And with that in mind, I just want to bring up that this is the second take of the first episode because we had a misstep where my side didn't get recorded. And so here we are with take 2. And with that being said, we wanted to structure the show in a way that would allow for just a conversation to take place, and for that to be, just because we found that we've got a good back and forth in that we were able to explore topics and kind of share the way that we do it and how it applies to our lives. And there was just something about it that just resonated with me and I feel with you. Mm-hmm. And there's just something special there. And so we decided to do this in a way that has like a structure, and that structure is that, this is the first episode, and the next episode won't be just like this one because we'll pretty much jump into the next topic right off the bat. But this first episode, we needed a topic that would be a good place to start. And so we came up with overcoming negative thoughts. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of explore that and just talk about it and how it fits into our lives and how we've experienced it in the past and just things of that nature, like not just like contemplate it, but like reflect on how it's, why it's even a topic in the first place that's even relative, and or even relevant, I should say. And so at the end of this episode, we're going to announce next week's topic, and the point in doing that is so that throughout, the coming week, we can have the intention that having said it will allow us to be mindful of how it shows up in our life. And that'll be kind of the basis, like week to week, from which we're gonna, the way the show is going to be done. And so if you're interested in that and you'd like to join us in doing that, we've got a subreddit that we'll post that would be a good place to maybe leave comments and say how that's, relevant to you and maybe your experiences with that. And, who knows, maybe it'll be something that is really powerful and we can share on the show and dive into that as like a topic as well. So is there anything else that you'd want to add to like the whole frame?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. And if you don't have anything to add, I think we can go ahead and jump right into the topic of overcoming our negative thoughts.
Let's get it.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what are some of the negative thoughts you've had and how have you been able to overcome them?
Well, I think the only way to approach this is to be really honest and about myself. And the negative thoughts that I have are really just the way I see myself. And this is kind of complicated, but not really, because I think a lot of people feel this way. And it's the way I think other people see me, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a reflection of how I really see myself. And just about most of my negative thoughts are kind of rooted in that, at least from a social standpoint. Because there's a lot of like self-confidence things that become issues and a lot of just, not having a strong place to like a foundation to move from. And I just kind of feel like when your foundation, like your spiritual foundation isn't like fundamentally strong, it's something that when this whole thing of life comes full circle, it's just something that gets torn down and you're left trying to pick up the pieces and understand how it all happened that you got to this place. So maybe you can expand on that.
I actually, so the way I experience my negative thoughts is, for example, when something happens, right? What I tend to do is I tend to label them good or bad. And when I have this label, then I start reflecting on them, right? And a lot of the times what my mind naturally does is it starts to drift towards the bad things. So I start to notice these bad things. And when we understand why our brains do that, it's to keep us safe, right? Our brain is just a big safety mechanism. It's designed to keep us alive, to survive. So it's constantly looking for problems, even in the good, so that way it can keep you safe from them. And that was really profound knowledge for me learning, because I'm like, okay, I'm seeing, like, I have all these good situations happening around me, all these great experiences, and they're great for a short time. But as soon as that kind of spark dies off a little bit, I'm starting to see a lot of bad in all of them. But it's not necessarily that they're bad at all. It's just the way my brain is starting to interpret things now is in a way to keep me safe. So that's why I find myself having, I guess I would say, negative thoughts. And how do you feel about that?
Well, there's the thing that I think about is like historically, right? Mm-hmm. There was a time when, people didn't have what we have today, and that's the comfort of having a culture that has a place for you to, keep warm, and, because what it used to be is that people had to, live in tribes and
No.
go hunt for food, and so like everything about the way life was lived so many years ago was just automatic, and the problems that they had were it was about survival, right?
Right.
And the negative thoughts that we have are generally not about that, but we kind of perceive it that way, even if we don't realize it. Like we struggle with it, like we're fighting for our lives, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what you said is that's what it kind of sparked in me is how I feel that way about it. So yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that I've definitely done to kind of like combat these negative thoughts, right, was I stopped labeling, first off, tried my best to stop labeling things as good or bad. That way I can just see the experience for what it actually was. And from there, I can analyze and see if I'm really in any sort of danger. And a lot of the times I find that I'm not. And so when I realize that I'm not in danger, my anxiety is brought down, and I'm able to take these situations that I'm in, and I'm able to now see the good and the bad in them. And that's one of my favorite things to do, because like I said, a lot of times we focus on the negative, right? And it's just a label that we've created. Like, it does nothing actually is making this experience negative, and we're just having this negative thought about the experience. And that's where, like, one of my favorite terms is the yin and the yang, when so often our attention is focused on the negative. We're not focusing on the other end of the spectrum, which is, I guess, what you could call good, and how those two things together make an experience whole. And you can't label that experience anything, because I mean, there's good and bad in it, or what are you going to call that? It's just an experience.
Yeah.
And that's what as humans, I feel like that's what, I guess you could say, our purpose is. We're here to experience.
Right. And you said the word anxiety, and that's like a trigger word for me now. Like, not like I'm being triggered. We're not talking about that. It's anxiety is like an indicator, right? Mm-hmm. It's something you feel when you either reflect on the past in a negative way, or you're thinking about the future. And the past is one thing, and it's definitely negative when it's anxiety about the past. But when you're thinking about the future and it's anxiety, we have this like response to anxiety, whether or not it's good or bad. The fact that we feel anxiety, we automatically assume that it's like panic mode or something similar, right? And when it's tied to thinking about the future, that really just doesn't make any sense, because if you really think about it, the future isn't anything, right?
It's not real. It's just,
right.
It's an illusion.
Exactly.
It doesn't exist yet.
And to waste all of that enormous brain power that we have, which we all have it, right?
Yeah.
And when you think of it that way, and you think about your brain as being something that's trying to solve a problem, and you make that problem something that's impossible to determine. I mean, there are just so many like avenues and ways it's going to try to solve that problem. And when it can't even be solved to begin with, that's a problem.
And another thing too is the brain, it's like going down a rabbit hole. You'll find problem after problem after problem. Like, they're not going to go away. And as long as you keep looking, you're going to keep finding. That's for sure. So,
and so what it turns into is the reason I say anxiety is an indicator is when you come to this conclusion that anxiety is just worrying about the future, and you realize that the future itself is just impossible to determine, then, you know, what it comes down to is, you know, I'm feeling anxious about the future. I know that that's fundamentally not something I should worry about. And so now I need to bring myself back to a calm place. And so how do you do that?
So what I do is I keep in mind that the only thing that's going to determine my future is what I'm doing right now in this present moment, right? So if I'm constantly in this state of anxiety and being worried about the future, how can I do anything for my future that's going to affect it in a positive manner? So what I need to do is take a second to kind of step out of my head. And sometimes this can be through meditation or even just a quick shower. Or what I like to do actually is when I get in the shower, turn it really cold. And it does suck, right? It's not always fun. But what you're doing is that's really going to bring you into the present moment. Like, the only thought you're going to have is like, oh my God, I want to get out of this. I want to get out of this. But you're so focused in like feeling that cold, and you're not going to be worried about what's going to happen in the future. You're worried about the next 5 seconds and if you're going to be in the water or not, you know? So
oh, man.
that helps a lot. If you are at home and have the time to do that, I definitely recommend it.
Well, there's something to be said about that whole cold thing, right? It's like you see a lot of athletes or people that take those ice baths, and you know, that's definitely a huge part of it is being able to sit and endure, right? And so what you kind of get out of that is if you can sit there and if you can take something that is uncomfortable but you know it's not going to physically hurt you, and if you can sit with that for any amount of time, then as it brings you into the moment, it brings you back to like the reality of the present moment. And, you know, we can talk about all the health aspects of stuff like the sitting in ice baths and stuff like that. But, you know, that's a really good point that you brought up the yin and the yang, because there's something that just feels right when you think about it this way. And the yin and the yang is it's a circle with a left and a right side, but the right side is represented in the left and in the small dot. So the left side could be the black side, and there's the white dot within that. And then the right side is the white half with the black dot in it. And so what that represents is that both sides are parts of the same whole, right?
Exactly.
And so what it kind of comes down to is, where do you want to be within that? If you're whatever side is whatever, positive or negative, right? When you think about like opposites, then if you're too much on one side, then the other side's just going to come crashing down on you that much harder, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you would want to do is be in the middle and have a foot in both sides. And so I think what we're trying to do is explain how we do that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Kind of finding that balance in between the yin and the yang. And that is I found like the best way for me to do that is just recognizing what I'm doing, right? Just having the awareness, and I'm putting all my attention into the negative, and I'm completely forgetting about the yang and the good that can come out of it too. And a lot of times, even when we go through a situation and say we do label it bad, maybe it is a bad situation, maybe it sucks, but we're not seeing the opportunity that's able to come out of it because of how focused we are on the negative part of it, and we're not focused on the good that can come out of it and the whole that can come out of it. So like, for example, I'm going through a breakup, right? And I'm just focused on all these negative things about the breakup and how I miss my partner and how I wish they were here. Like, I'm wondering if they're off with another person. But what I'm not doing is focusing on the growth that can come from this. Like, now I have experience of what it's like to be in a relationship, and maybe that
Yep.
person brought in some tendencies that I didn't like. So now I have a better understanding of myself and some of the green flags that I look for out of a relationship, and how I can possibly even do some self-reflecting on things that I could have done better in the relationship. And now, even though it sucks and it costs us the relationship, we still have a lot of value to take from it to bring into our next relationship, and possibly have a much stronger connection with that person and a stronger connection within ourselves, because now we have a lot more knowledge and experience, and we can take that and apply it to the whole, where we have the good and the bad. We take it together, and we don't even need to label it. We just label it as, I guess the label we could give it is just an experience, and we can leave it at that and take what we can from it.
Absolutely. And, you know, it kind of comes down to, you know, what we're really doing is using an additional kind of a method to bring us back to that place. And when you talk about the experience as a whole, it's kind of like you can take solace in knowing that just having the experience itself, whether it's good or bad, is just simply that. Like, if it's bad, then, you know, you recognize that it wouldn't be bad unless it was good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to, you know, kind of go further on that, which is, there's an episode of South Park where Stan is going through a breakup, and he's got this really like negative, just like can't see any of the positive in life, and everything that he sees is just another version of that. And when that's all that you can be aware of, and that's the only, you know, place that you're kind of considering, and you're not thinking about the whole picture, everything in your life is a reflection of that, and that's what you see. And there's a moment where he comes across Butters, and Butters is going through the same thing, right? Like, he's sitting on the curb, it's raining, and he had a breakup, and Stan comes up to him, and he says, you know, he starts to be like, oh, you're going through this too? And, you know, he starts to like give off that vibe of everything is negative because I'm in that negative place right now. And Butters just naturally, like without a thought, just instantly rejects it. And he says, are you crazy? I'm crying because I'm happy. I'm happy that I was ever able to be, happy enough to feel this sad, right? And just that whole mindset, like being able to see that, it is like eye-opening. And there's something to that, you know, like clearly, because if you can adopt that way of thinking, then it's going to allow you to experience everything as a whole. And that's just kind of the thing that I think about when you kind of frame it that way. And I think that's really important to consider.
Yeah, and it brings a whole other kind of emotion to it. You, instead of having a negative or a positive feeling towards the experience, you just have a sense of gratitude that you even got to experience it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm probably gonna mention this handfuls of times because this is like one of my favorite things to refer to, and it does involve the yin and yang again, and we can apply it to ourselves too, right? Like when we're when we're making someone happy, we're laying the groundwork for the sadness. The same refers to us. When we're doing things that are making ourselves happy, when we're finding ways to do that, we're also simultaneously finding ways to make ourselves sad. And a lot of times we overlook that. So, for example, if I am out looking for a new relationship to fulfill this desire
to rebound, right?
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, to fulfill this desire of not being lonely anymore. And this new relationship makes me happy. in an instant, that same very thing that was making me happy can make me just as sad. And a lot of times people don't realize that is we're putting ourselves in these situations to allow yin and yang to even exist.
And so when you kind of think about it that way, like what comes to my mind is, you know, there's times when I have these positive interactions with people, and you know, I'm almost like that. There comes to a point for me when, you know, I'm considering all these things and I'm mindful of it, and it's like it's a way it all comes back and kind of crashes in my face, and it's because, you know, I'm now aware of these things, and so when I talk to somebody, I'm almost like afraid to be my genuine self, because I'm, you know, when they say thank you, it like I almost want to say don't thank me, right? Like don't let me know that you're happy, because I'm just going to know that you're going to be sad, right?
Yeah.
And I used to do that a lot, and then I realized like you just can't live your life that way, and so you kind of have to realize like this whole like balance thing is more than just these individual situations, because if you frame it that way, then you're going to have all of these individual situations that at one point or another are going to come crashing down in just ways that tear you apart. And so when you take that and you apply it to life as a whole, I think it just works better that way.
Yeah, and like you said too, that was something I was really scared of too. Like I was scared of, you know, going to find a new relationship with someone, because I knew in an instant it could make me sad. So I was stopping. I'm just using that as an example because I know that's something that a lot of people can relate to, is relationships, because, well, damn near everyone's been in one. So like I would purposely not put myself in these situations, like I said, because I know going out to find a relationship would make me feel happy. But in doing so, I knew I would end up sad at some point or another, and I didn't want to feel like that. So I stopped myself from doing so. And that's also not an approach that you really want to take to life, because then you're taking away, you know, a purpose. You're taking away the experience from yourself. And I mean, within that, you're also creating an entirely different experience, and that would be isolation and loneliness.
Yeah.
And you would still try to find another source to fulfill that gap, right?
And
So
it just becomes this vicious cycle.
yeah, exactly, and it does. So what I would always recommend to anyone, and this is something I have to remind myself of too, is even though I know going into something, there might be a situation I'll label as good or bad, I need to accept that and surrender to letting whatever happens and accept it for what it is, and just appreciate the experience.
And there's something about that when you actually do it that way, I don't know what it is, but things just seem to work better. Like,
Yeah, they do.
it just changes your entire outlook, and it, you know, that may be a part of it. Your outlook being changed might be part of it, but even if in the end you look at this objectively, it just works out better that way. And I can't explain it. It just happens that way.
Yeah, and you know what I want to think that is almost is when you're coming into it with like a sort of, you know, that kind of mindset where you're looking at the whole and you're being aware of the bigger picture, and you're not necessarily putting all your attention to it. You're just, you know, going into it. You're just aware of it, of, you know, that yin and the yang. So what happens is you're going into it with gratitude already that you get to experience this, and going into it with that gratitude, you're coming from like a place of compassion and love, and your more authentic self than you would be going into it totally gung-ho and happiness. And then when, you know, it comes crashing down and you're sad, then, you know, you're broken and you're going, you know how that cycle goes. Or
Absolutely.
when you're going into something, you're expecting it to let you down. You're not going in with your true authentic energy. You're letting either polar or end of the spectrum, you cloud your energy a little bit. And so going into it with that kind of mindset, like I said, you just experience the gratitude of being able to even experience it, and it puts you in a place of love and compassion too. You know what I'm saying. I
Well,
think that's all I need to
I
say about it.
I do, and it's that it becomes something else, right? And you kind of alluded to it with that word gratitude, like it just, when you take that approach and it's everything as a whole, that thing that it comes back to, like, the whole flow of things and the natural way that things just progress.
Right.
And what it turns into is you're not fighting it anymore. You're just there and you're just in it. And I might not have a good explanation for what that is, but it definitely is that, and I feel like that's really been reflective in my life this week. And maybe, like, that's the thing that I haven't been doing in the past that I'm doing now is, I even said it just a little bit ago, and it's that even when you're experiencing these things that are good, you're not taking the whole picture into consideration. And so eventually, like, the good and the bad just tear everything apart. And when that's not really part of the equation, things just seem to run. And it just works that way.
Yeah, and it definitely, like, I feel like the best way to explain that is just acceptance. And like you said, just letting things flow in their true nature, because, I mean, they're going to flow that way regardless of how we feel about it. We can't force our will onto any situation and expect a good outcome, So,
Yeah.
And anytime we usually try to force our will on anything, we're always disappointed in one way or another, because it's not going to go exactly the way we envisioned it, right? So the best
Absolutely.
thing, yeah, and that also leads to a lot of negative thoughts. And we try and then we could get stuck in this loop of where could I have done things differently? How could I have actually make it bend to my will? And then you're stuck in this loop of what ifs, and what if things would have been different, or how this could have played out. And you're just living in this land of illusion. And
Yeah.
and it's sad.
Well-
And I would be lying if I said I didn't do that for most of my life.
There's a whole nother side to that we are coming to now, which is people see that in you, right?
Oh yeah.
They might not, like, know it like, be able to look at it and say, oh, you see everything, and I see that in you. They might not know that, but, like, on like an instinctual level, there's just that non-resistance, and people almost just kind of gravitate to that in a positive way,
Yeah.
because you're just naturally, like, you can just see it in people, and it just, people seem to just flow along with you when that's what's going on.
Oh yeah, and like I love that word flow, because it's like what we're doing is we're letting the universe and nature flow through us like it was meant to, with a sort of love and compassion and gratitude. And of course people are going to gravitate towards that because it's in their true nature as well. So when people recognize that, they obviously want to surround themselves around more of that, because that's their true nature as well.
And that kind of, it brings the part where you can have these individual experiences, and that's part of why it's so confusing, because you do things that no one else is involved in, and it works a certain way, and you think, okay, so this attitude and this approach yielded me these results, and so I can apply that to this, right? And this that you're applying to is like a social thing, and maybe that approach doesn't work with a certain social situation, and when you boil it down, it's that that place of confusion, that what you're really doing is not considering the whole, and you're only not doing that because you're just not present with your awareness about everything around you.
Right. And another thing I would like to really add on to that too is like I don't a lot of times, and I find this really like I'm really guilty of this all the time, is I'm not aware of the impact that I'm having on people. Like the energy that I have, it projects onto other people regardless if I'm intending for it to or not. And it's like it's real. I mean, like, you know, that feeling you get when someone's staring at you and it feels like a light pressure that you can actually feel, you know. And
Yeah.
it'd be insane to not think that the energy we're exuding out of our bodies isn't affecting other people in any sort of way, when we can do it with literally just our eyes
Yeah.
unintentionally.
And, a lot of people, I think that ties into, because that's like it's empathy, right? Um, I've heard it called like dark empath before. Like I feel
Oh,
like that
I've heard
term.
that term before. I actually did
Yeah.
a lot of research on that.
Yeah. So kind of that whole side of it, like you were talking about, you can feel people like watching you and that whole thing. Like I kind of want to be clear about what I mean by empath. Like for me anyway, it's it's a combination of a lot of different things. It's when I see somebody, I'm looking at certain things, right? I'm aware of the tone of their voice. I'm aware of their body language. I'm aware of, like do they appear anxious? Are they nervous?
Right.
Is their mind somewhere else, right? And all of those things kind of create this like feeling I have about their energy, right? And that what I'm really talking about is how other people see that in myself, right? And so when you're in this place of gratitude and aware and present of the entirety of the place that you're in, you're not giving off those signs that people pick up and see that way. And it's like you said, it reflects back. And so, people are just more dispositioned to like gravitate towards that rather than see those, possible like markers of, oh, he doesn't want to be here. He'd rather be somewhere else. And, those assumptions they make based off of those things like body language and tone of voice and all of those things. And it just all feeds back into each other.
Yeah. And like another thing too that I would add is like people, when you go into a room, you can literally like almost feel that energy, you know. And it's like I'm like a lot of times I found myself like trying to put on this mask, put on this face of like, you know, I am happy, don't worry about it, I'm all good, it's all positive vibes, you know, whatever. But like when people would come around me, like I could tell that they still felt that like kind of off energy, especially from someone that knows me very well. They can still like, they're like, okay, like you look like you're going through it, you just don't want to talk about it right now. Totally cool, we could talk about it later. But they can feel
Right.
it, you know, like they know, like you could feel that energy. So
Yeah. And it's one of those things like you only know that because you've been the opposite, right? And I think there's, it kind of comes back to all of these things that we've been talking about where you can't just kind of take something at face value. You have to like consider everything together. And that's really hard for me to do a lot of the time. And what I've noticed is that the need to kind of do that on an individual case by case basis is just not there when I'm present in the moment. And because ultimately I think the thing about these negative reoccurring thoughts is that it's better to just not divulge in the thought at all, whether it's good or bad, right?
yeah, most definitely. Um, that was like a point we were making earlier is like good or bad. It's we don't necessarily we don't need to label it, you know. We just
Yeah.
allow ourselves to experience. And like I said, that, or one point I was going to bring up earlier that I forgot to mention, but I'll bring up now, is like the power of acceptance and surrender and letting the flow of nature flow as it will. And that kind of ties back into, not trying to force your will on anything, because it's gonna, it's gonna kick you in the teeth. Yeah, I know from experience. So
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's like a whole other like couple of topics that we could dive into on, separate episodes. Is like the power of acceptance and the power of surrender, and how you can use those, and how to even achieve that.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Like one thing I struggled with was, all these negative things in the world that are happening. How do I accept that? How do I accept that people are getting murdered? How do I accept that people are getting raped? Like, these are horrible, horrible things to happen. And how can I accept that nature, the universe, or you can call it God, whatever you want to call it, would let that happen? And like I said, that would just be something we'd probably have to dive into on a whole other episode, because there'd be a lot to unpack there. But
oh yeah. I'd love to do it though.
Oh yeah. Learning how to accept situations as they are is one of I found the most beneficial ways for me to liberate myself from the suffering I've put on myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
In turn with that, I mean, negative thoughts go hand in hand with suffering. So once I learn how to accept situations for they are, and accept that things are going to be the way that they are, and accept that, or have the understanding that there's a yin and a yang from it as well. And that's part of what makes, or how you can accept things, is with all these, what you would label bad things going on, is if you take a second to look at the whole picture, you'll see the experience for what it is. And the knowledge and insight and every beneficial thing that we can gain from it, if we take a step back and stop trying to label the good or the bad, or focusing too much on one or the other.
And that kind of brings back the point of, what we're trying to do here is find ways that we can, rationalize when we're not in that, right? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately it's going to happen. There's going to be a time where you feel like you're considering all of these things, and things just still seem to go wrong, and you can't figure out why. And I really think acceptance is the best way to do that. And it kind of brings the whole kind of picture into focus, right? And it just ties into everything else in a really good way. And I would definitely love to unpack acceptance as a whole, because there's, right. I know that you've struggled with addiction, and I have too. And there's a lot that I learned when I was in recovery that really applied in that sense. Mm-hmm. And
oh yeah, working the 12 steps, there's so many aspects of it that lead to learning how to accept.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with all of that in mind, what else would you like to add about overcoming negative thoughts?
I don't think that there's really much more to it that I could try and unpack right now. I feel like we definitely unpacked a lot as it is. The only emphasis I would put on things would be to see the yin and the yang in every situation, and see how you can use that to your benefit, and see everything as a whole, and just be grateful for the experience. And the other emphasis I would like to put on is acceptance and surrender. Those are two very impactful things when, like I said, if you can accept things as they are, a lot of the times your negative thoughts will cease to end.
Yeah, for sure.
It's because you've liberated yourself from a place of suffering. Which,
no, go ahead.
One more thing I'd like to say is I know we talk about this, right? Almost as if it's like easy to do or we have been doing it. We're talking about this because it's something that we still struggle with day to day. And by us talking about it, it's putting it in the front of our mind so we can have our intentions going into next week, or reflecting on last week where we had opportunities for us to take advantage of this and we missed them, and how we can make sure that we are more mindful of that on this upcoming week, or any time that the present moment calls for us to be mindful of it, right? So this is just us learning how to exercise that spiritual muscle.
And I just can't get over that line that my whole life is just the chances I'm not taking from that song. And that's just, in that sense, it's really powerful. Like just accepting that for what it is, you know, like at any point in time, you can look back and think, you know, this or that, or it's, you know, that, not this, but all of that is just negative thoughts that keep you out of the present moment. And when you see that for what it is, and you use some of these tools that we've talked about, because ultimately what you want to do is realize that, you know, now I have some things that I can use to apply to myself when this happens, because it's going to happen. And I really love that you said that the whole reason we're talking about it is because we have such a problem with it.
Yeah.
And I think there's that means a lot to me. It really does. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Well, with that, do you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up this episode?
I think that I'm probably good. So I guess we just need to announce next week's topic, right?
Yeah, and that was setting ourselves up for success. And kind of what that's going to look like for me and Sean this upcoming week is we're going to be mindful of what we can do to set ourselves up for success in the future. Not necessarily putting all of our attention in the future, but putting our attention in the present moment and see how we can make that, how we can influence our future for a more desirable outcome. And so what we're going to do is see what kind of opportunities we have in this upcoming week to capitalize on that. And then on this upcoming episode, we are going to kind of reflect on that and what we did accomplish, where we had opportunities and maybe missed them, and how we can be more mindful of them the next time that opportunity is presented. And we will definitely check in with like our subreddit and see if anyone else had some experiences that were really profound, and maybe we can talk about on the episode as well.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm really, really glad that we took the time to come back and finish this tonight and keep it the thing that it, you know, the thing that it almost wasn't when we almost didn't come back and finish this thing out. So, you know,
No.
I'm just so glad that this is, you know, really, really happening. And it's just been an amazing life, an amazing week. You're an amazing friend, and I'm just
you as well.
I'm just grateful for the whole thing. So I just want to say thank you, and that's all I've got. So
Yeah, I appreciate you too so much as a friend, and hopefully anyone listening can take some valuable information from some of the topics that we've discussed, and hopefully they can apply it to their lives. And yeah, that's all I can ask for. And again, just thank you so much for being a part of this experience with me.
it wouldn't be an experience without you, brother.
All right, so that'll wrap up this episode, and we will talk again next week.
Awesome. See you next time.